Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I would like to welcome you to this webinar. We're going to go over features on Zoom so that in case you are using it, you are able to know what the key areas to look at are. My name is Pablo Avila from Center for Teaching and Learning. Thank you once again for joining this session. We are recording this session, by the way, so that we can make it available to everyone else who was not able to join today's session. I have my colleague Priscilla on the line as well. She's going to be moderating the Q&A and parts of the session as well. And I wanted to show you this website right up front. All of the recordings of these sessions are going into the LaGuardia main page. If you scroll down a little bit and you see the faculty resources, you're going to see this page right here. We're posting all of the recordings of our sessions in here so that you're able to go back to them and take a look at them as you need. Right now, what I would like to do is go ahead and get started. One of the things that Zoom has become certainly a popular tool in the last few months, to say the least. So we wanted to make sure that we offer this session so that we can go over some of the key features, but at the same time, some of the newest updates in terms of how to use it for your own classes. So in terms of the session for today, we're going to be reviewing some of those settings before scheduling a meeting. This is something that it's important to do so that whenever you schedule a meeting, you are able to cover specific features. You're able to have specific features, whether you're scheduling a meeting for a group of faculty, a group of colleagues, or for your own classes. This will apply in the same way. There's a portion of this session that will cover hands-on, which means that I will go on the browser and I will show you what these features are, and you're welcome to follow along. And obviously, we will have a Q&A time so that you can ask any questions. We're going to review the host options as well. As a host, as the person who schedules and runs the session, you have a range of different features that you can use at any time in case you do need to engage your students with breakout group work or individual work, or even if you have to mute participants or students so that everyone can hear you clearly. We're going to go over all of those things as well. An additional feature that Zoom offers is the personal meeting room and an ID. And I'm going to go over that as well so that you can potentially consider using that for your faculty office hours if that is an option for you. We're also going to review privacy measures by Zoom and also the overview of the CUNY Security Protocol on using the tool. When you register for this webinar, you were sent a link to review that PDF. I'm going to post it on the screen, and I'm also going to show you where the link is, so that way you are able to fully read the whole document. And some recommendations for using Zoom for office hours. We will share that we will share that by the end of the session. A couple of quick points. These are things that have come up in the last few weeks, regular common questions that I get all the time. As of the time of this recording, the college does not offer an institutional account for faculty. I get that question all the time, and I'm sure you've spoken about it with your colleagues as well. I've also gotten this question: if a faculty member signs up to Zoom, a lot of faculty are concerned about using their personal email. You might want to consider using your Outlook if that is the case. So that way you can keep your account affiliated with your college Outlook email. Zoom released a set of security measures on April 8th. And this was the biggest jump in terms of releasing security and privacy features. So it is recommended that all users update their desktop client and mobile devices. And by desktop client, I mean the actual software that you download into your computer. You don't have to do anything on your account on the web browser. It's just the client that you download, whether you download it on your computer, on your Windows, on your Mac. or also on your phone. If you downloaded the app on your phone or tablet, you should also make sure that you update those devices as well. What it will do is it will simply refresh the app so that it brings and enables all of the security features that they released. CUNY has a specific guidelines, and this refers to the PDF document that you may have read already. I will make sure that I share that in the presentation so that you're fully aware of the features that are recommended. I think Michelle, my colleague Michelle from Health Sciences was sharing this. Zoom continues to limit the meetings of more than 3 people to 40 minutes. This is what is on the Zoom website. I was doing a little bit of more research in the last few days in preparation for this, and there's that limitation, right? So if you're conducting a class, what a faculty member once told me from another college is this faculty member was scheduling 2 consecutive meetings for her class with a 50-minute break in between, and that's how she was able to bypass that 40-minute limit, and also give her students a 15-minute break. So that may be an option, but that's something to account for. It's never recommended to post meeting IDs or URLs to social media or publicly because that may be potentially risky in terms of the famous Zoom bombing that you may have heard over the news. So whenever you schedule a meeting, and we're going to go over those features, make sure that you limit that to the people that you want in the meeting. So whether you're sending an email to your students, I send a link via my Blackboard course to my students, so that way only them will know that. Zoom is one option, and that's important to consider. Blackboard Collaborate, it's another option. CUNY WebEx is another option, and they have similar capabilities. They may not offer the same features per se if you compare them side by side, but they are very similar, and you're welcome to explore all of those as well. The main difference between Blackboard Collaborate, CUNY WebEx, and Zoom, obviously, is that the first 2 are provided by CUNY, and there's a license for that. So let me move along. There's a couple of important quick facts that I wanted to share with you. Zoom reported back in December 2019 that there was 10 million users by the end of that month. And by the end of March, they went up to 200 million users. So that's important for context and for understanding how popular this tool has become, and at the same time, the potential risks and security issues and concerns that you may have read over the news. It obviously is important to consider that. You can also join a Zoom meeting from the browser and bypass the download of the client. We can absolutely do that. There's an option on the settings that I will show you, so that you can make sure that you do that. By doing this, it is also recommended, especially for users or students who may not be able to download something into a computer. So a student may not have that capability, memory, or any other feature. So he or she may be able to join a Zoom meeting directly from the browser. There's a couple of features that are quite different if you want to enable polling or any other kind of special feature that may not be fully functional on the browser. But certainly it's an option for students who are not able to download something on the computer. You can remove a participant from a session if that is the case, if someone is being disruptive, and prevent them from rejoining that same session. There's also a feature that we can enable that. You can pin a video up on the screen if you or a participant needs to have a sign language interpreter. I know a couple of faculty that have reached out with specific recommendations for supporting students who have those needs, and how does Zoom provide support to that. So there's an option for pinning a video and making sure that a sign language interpreter is visible at all times. You can enable the gallery view and display up to 49 video thumbnails on your screen. This all depends on the size of your screen. But let's say right now I am sharing my screen, so you should be able to see my screen, and then just either at the top or on the right side, the video thumbnails of everyone in the session. But when you're not sharing something, you're able to view every single video thumbnail, up to 49. And this is quite helpful, especially when you want to interact with your class and you want to make sure that you're looking at them at all time. And you can enable the breakout room on basic free accounts. And this is also something that I've been getting a lot of questions about. It is not enabled by default. So there's an option in the settings that I will make sure that I show you. So let's go ahead and jump into going over those features. At this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this slideshow presentation, and I'm going to go into my browser to show you what my account looks like. Everything that I'm going to show you on the account that I will go ahead and look at, it's on a basic free account. Whether you have that or you have a pro account, there will be minor differences that I'll be happy to speak to at the end of the session. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. And if you have the full maximized window, you can simply hit the escape button, depending on whether you're on a Mac or a Windows, or simply open a different browser and log into your Zoom, logging into your Zoom account on the web browser, zoom.com, and I will show you the features there.
Hello. I'm good, thank you. How you doing?
So I will now jumping and share my screen. I'm seeing a couple of questions on the chat. I'll make sure that we get to them. My colleague Priscilla is also going to help me filter those questions and make sure that we're addressing them. So let me just go and share my screen right here. Once you are on the Zoom website, you should see something like what I have on the screen. You go into zoom.com, and you will be able to see the features right on the left side. If you go ahead and click on your account profile on the top right, the profile is going to be the first item that you're going to see. The section that I want to take you through is the settings right here on the left. This has a number of different settings that are important to check before scheduling our first meeting. All of these settings are going to apply globally to any meeting that you schedule. So these are global changes that you will make, and then they will be enabled by default. I'm not going to go through every single one of this. I do want to go through a number of them, but obviously I will make sure that I stop so that way we're able to take questions if you have any, okay? So on the settings, again, I'm on the Zoom website, and right on the left, I'm clicking on settings. And you will see the meetings right up here. Obviously, this means that it is turned off, and if you want to enable it, you simply toggle it to the right. When scheduling a meeting, you can have the host video enabled by default. I will make a recommendation at the end of this presentation to not do that and to initiating the video manually because not everyone may be comfortable in displaying the video right away. It's just a personal recommendation that you may want to follow, but this is essentially what this is. And this is essentially for participants. So if you want, when participants are joining into the session, for instance, right now, you are joining into the session and you may have seen your video turned on by default. So all of the settings are right here as well. This is something important, this option right here. If you keep scrolling down on that page, and once again, I am on the settings. When I click on settings, I simply scroll down right here. The join before host. This was disabled by default, and instead the waiting room was enabled by default by Zoom. And what that means is that whenever a participant joins the session or the meeting, he or she will have to wait until the host lets them in. So the join before host, in my particular case for this session, I did not enable that. And that's why you were able to jump on the call without me getting on the call first. So that's essentially what it means. It's always recommended to get into the meeting 5 minutes ahead of time so that you can then let your students in if you're enabling the waiting room, which is one feature that it's required or which is recommended, highly recommended by CUNY. It's never recommended to use a personal meeting ID. I'm going to go over the details in just a moment, but the personal meeting ID should ideally be used when you want to have one-on-one meetings or meetings with people that you regularly meet. When you want to have a public event or when you want to have a meeting with people that you don't normally meet with, it's always recommended to generate an automatic meeting ID number, and Zoom is going to generate a random number every time you schedule that. The reason for that is that the personal meeting ID is, think of it like your cell phone, and it actually has the sequence of 7 numbers. So if you're giving that to everyone, you're providing that personal information. So it's always recommended that you keep the personal meeting ID to meetings that you will have with people that you regularly meet with. It is off by default. A couple of things that I want to go in here is the embedding the password in meeting link for one click to join. What this essentially means is that Zoom also on April 8th enabled the password for all meetings. So every time you schedule a meeting, the password field will be automatically turned on. And what that means is that every time a student receives a link on the invitation, he or she will also receive a password. If you enable this option, what this option means is it will encrypt the password into that URL. So the student is simply going and clicking on that and does not need to enter manually a password. If you obviously turn this off, then the student will have to enter that password every time he or she joins. I will show you what that difference looks like and when it comes to generating that link. I want to stop here for a minute. And Priscilla, I'm not following the chat right now, but are there any questions that we can raise at this point?
There are a couple of questions, and there's one immediate issue, which is Louisa is trying to get to her settings, and you recommended going into a different browser than the one that you're attending the meeting with, if possible, right?
If you're not attending the meeting, the meeting right now should be on the client because the meeting through the browser was not enabled. So if you go into zoom.com and you're prompted to log in, go ahead and log in. And then after you log in, you simply click on your icon right here.
I think it's zoom.us.
That is correct. Zoom.us. Yeah, it's if you type in zoom.com, it will also redirect you. But yeah, zoom.us, and then you click on your icon, and then once you land on your dashboard, you will click on settings, and these are the settings that that we're revisiting right now.
She's trying to minimize the screen, it sounds like, so she can.
Is she on a Mac or on a Windows?
Not sure.
And I'm gonna go ahead and take a quick look at the chat as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so we are joining. If you open your browser, Chrome or Firefox, you are able to log into the Zoom website and then see the settings right on the left. Were there any other, let's see, here's a question. How do you send the invitation from Blackboard? Is it all right to use personal email invitations rather than like what I email? Absolutely. If you choose to use your LaGuardia Outlook email or your personal Gmail, it's totally fine. It's totally up to you. To show you quickly, if you go into any schedule a meeting, it will generate a link that I will show you in a moment, and you essentially share that link on your Blackboard course, just like sharing a link to a Google website or to a WordPress website. You simply embed that hyperlink. What I normally do is I post it on the announcements so that I tell my students, we're meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Here's the link for you to join then. So it is like embedding any regular link. And you're able to use any email account that you want. My personal recommendation is to use your Outlook, but you don't have to follow that. Yeah.
Okay, looks like we're good with Luisa now. Maureen is asking, how do you do closed captioning?
Oh.
And, okay, well, let's start with that.
Yes, so I will show you how to, on the settings where that is. A quick thing, and I think a colleague, John Collins from the ELA department shared this. So Zoom, right now, it's my understanding that they offer closed captioning, but what that essentially is assigning a captioner, assigning someone else to take notes manually, that individual taking notes of what it's being said and broadcasting that to the rest of the participants. So it is not automatic. There's no machine behind capturing everything that someone is saying. It is an individual, an actual a human person who is typing that and broadcasting that. And I will show you where on the settings is that. You essentially assign that to anyone. Let's say that for this meeting, I want to have a closed captioner, and I can give it to, I can assign Priscilla to do that, and she will be taking notes and broadcasting that to everyone.
Can I say something about that?
Yes, yeah, go ahead.
You shouldn't assign just anyone to type captions for a live event. It's a highly, it's a highly developed skill, that's professional skill that someone would have to have. So it wouldn't make sense to rely on one of your students to do it, or even somebody assisting in your class. This is a drawback of Zoom. And as I understand from another colleague who's here today, Sue Livingston, they are working on an actual automatic captioning feature, but it hasn't been implemented yet. Yes. So we're hoping that will come soon, but I don't know if there's any timetable on it yet.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Yes. So obviously, it's not a feature that you per se may want to utilize by assigning a random individual on your meeting, whether it's a faculty member or
especially not me, because I'm a terrible typist.
Yeah, it's a highly skilled that people are trained for. So on this section, the settings, this is one of the many. It is under in meeting advanced, and the option is right here, closed captioning. Allow host to type closed captions or assign a participant to add closed captions. So obviously this is off right now. If I were to turn it on, what you will see is on the ribbon at the bottom, you will see the closed caption option, but it's off right now. So thank you.
So another question Maureen had is, how do I move a recorded session from my local computer to the Blackboard site? Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Every time that you download, every time that you record a session, you can either record to the cloud or record to this computer. And by this computer, the computer where you're hosting the meeting. Obviously, if you do the second option, it will generate an actual file, an MP4 that you will then have to move as a regular file to your Blackboard site. Other faculty have asked about this, and I have spoken to a Blackboard admin, Jose Castro, and he indicated that it's not recommended to move the actual file, the video file, to the Blackboard site because of capacity issues. What it's recommended is to use other systems like Dropbox, for instance, or OneDrive to store those files and then share that link on your Blackboard site. So essentially, you're sharing a link to a folder, that is not public, you can make it public, but I'm sure you may not want to do that. You may share that with your own class where you're storing all of those files. Every time you record something to the computer, Zoom will generate a file, and then at the end of the meeting, it will bring up the folder where you can get the file from, and then you can transfer it to another local drive or cloud device. When you record to the cloud, you are able to share the recording via a URL. However, if you're running 40-minute meetings consecutively, you may run out of space on the actual online cloud that Zoom provides.
I think you also have to pay extra in Zoom to store it on the
that
cloud.
I don't know. That I don't know.
I believe you do, even beyond the monthly fee. Yeah, and you can make it very easy from Blackboard to make a Dropbox link in there.
Yes, and there's a session that I can recommend at the end that our colleague Derek Stadler did from the library. He ran a session on Dropbox on how to create a folder on Dropbox, enable it, and create a folder to share content with students. And Dropbox is offered by CUNY, so you have that online storage up there. Yeah.
And we have an unlimited amount of storage on Dropbox.
Okay.
Through CUNY for free.
I wanted to point out this feature right here, allow removed participants to rejoin. So I'm going to show you the link where you're able to see the participants and you're able to see the option to remove. But this is an option that I recommend that you enabled. What this means is that if there is any individual who's being disruptive or you need to remove for any reason, you remove that participant, and then if you enable this option, that participant will not be able to rejoin that meeting. So that's something that in terms of privacy, in terms of keeping your meeting secure, you might want to consider doing. I believe, and I'm not completely sure, but I believe this option is off by default, meaning you have to go and enable it. You simply toggle this and turn it on. And again, this means that if you remove someone from a meeting, that individual will not be able to rejoin that same meeting. I wanted to make sure that I also point out under meeting and basic, the breakout room feature is also listed. I believe this is also off by default. I don't know why, but you simply have to turn this on. And again, all of these settings that I'm showing you are settings on a basic account. So you should be able to see sort of the same. In case you do not, I'm happy to troubleshoot offline, but this is where the breakout room is. Everything is under settings. I have not moved away from this page. Everything is under settings. And in this case, under meeting basic, I see the breakout room and I can turn it on. What that will do is it will display the breakout room icon on the bottom right right side of the screen. Are there any other questions so far that you can help me with, Priscilla?
What's the purpose of the breakout room? To do side sessions?
Great question. The breakout room is essentially if we have a large room right now with 20 people, 30 people, and you enable the breakout room, you can essentially create small groups for students to work in that setting. And this right now, the call where we are on is considered the main room. And then when you create breakout rooms, you can either pre-assign, meaning assign specific people to that breakout room, or you can let Zoom do that randomly. And let's say you want to create 5 groups of 7 people. So you will tell Zoom, I want 5 groups, and then Zoom will distribute those rooms. And then they will be joined on a breakout room that you can then visit from room to room. And then obviously once everyone joins on the breakout room, this main room will remain empty because everyone is on the breakout room. And then you can call them back. You can close, as a host, you can close the breakout rooms, and then everyone will come back. At least I do that on my classes, and when I teach on Saturdays, my students enjoy a lot having that smaller interaction, smaller group interaction as best as they can.
Yeah, the breakout room is a really great feature. And it's just nice if you're in a very large group and then it's like meeting in a small group with people, and it really builds community, I think. It's nice that it's available as part of the free account.
There's another feature that I wanted to make sure that I point out is on the chat. The chat that you have right now, where you're jumping in with your questions. You can also control that if you want your students to be able that they are chatting only with you, or that they are chatting amongst themselves. For instance, this private chat is enabled by default. What that means is that when you are typing your message, you can choose to type into everyone or to type it to a specific individual. And if you do not want your students to chat amongst themselves, you can always disable this. And that way students will only be able to chat with you and not amongst themselves. Some faculty have asked about this, and I think this is a pretty handy feature. Auto-saving chats is also enabled by default. What this means is you can save the chat at the end of a meeting so that you can access it at a later point. So that's something to consider as well. File transfer as well is another feature that it's on the settings. And what this enables is it allows users to share actual files. So not only text, simple text, but also files. And in some cases, this may be disruptive if there are users that are sharing content that's not appropriate. So you may want to consider that depending on the context of your class, right? Once again, I want to make sure that I am guiding you as best as I can. I am on the Zoom website, and I am on settings on my dashboard. All of the settings that I have spoken so far about are all on the settings, and these are plenty. These are global settings that will apply to every meeting that you schedule. So it's important to revisit this before you schedule your meetings, so that way you are aware of the kinds of features that you have available. Any other question? I want to share one more feature.
I have
Is
a
there any other
question.
question? Yes, go ahead.
Yes, you say that you've got this. All this is typed on, and you're going to. We'll be able to see this after this meeting, and practice a little bit.
That is correct. So you will have two things after the meeting. Number one, the slides that I was sharing at the beginning that I'll continue to go over in a few minutes.
Right.
And number two, the recording of this session so that you can hear the recording of everything that we've discussed as many times as you would like.
Okay, well, okay, thank you.
Thank you. The screen sharing is one item that I wanted to share. By default is now restricted only to hosts, meaning I am the host and I am able to share my screen. You right now are not able to share your screen, but I can always control that, and I will show you where those controls are in just a moment, okay? So let me stop sharing this for just a moment, and I'm gonna go back and share my slides for just a moment. Any other questions as we move along?
Richa was asking, do advanced features need a paid membership?
Sorry, I'm on a laptop and sometimes my mouse goes away. Great question. No, the advanced features that you see listed here, you do not have to have a paid account. There are a couple of distinct features that you will still see there, but are simply grayed out. But those are very specific ones, like the polling, for instance. You can enable a poll during a meeting. That is a feature that's available only on pro accounts. But the rest of the advanced features that you see there, as long as you're able to click on them and play around with them, you do not have to have a pay account. Yeah, and everything that I showed you, by the way, is on a free basic account. So I wanted to keep going right here as I go ahead. Priscilla, if you could help me with any questions as we move along. Getting to know the host controls is very important. And I mentioned at the beginning that Zoom released a major update on April 8th. That is essentially this security icon that we're going to look at in just a moment. But this is the mute button and the start video, and you will see that at the bottom of your screen every time you are in a meeting. It is important to keep those controls handy so that you're able to either mute yourself or disable your video whenever you need to, and show your students how to do that as well. Most of the times you're able to hear background noise when other people are in noisy backgrounds environments. So that's a very handy feature to show them. This is the breakout rooms that I was mentioning a moment ago. If you enable that option that I showed you, you will see this icon right here. And this will allow you to, again, either create groups based on a specific assignment, meaning I want Priscilla to be with James, with Mary, and so forth. Or you can simply tell Zoom, I want 5 groups, and Zoom will randomly assign people. And the reactions is also another icon that's very handy. I find this helpful, especially for keeping students engaged. I normally tell them, okay, how are things going so far? Show me the hands up. And then they know how to do it. So I can see their hands up or the thumbs up, and I'm able to see that they're at least paying attention. As we move along here, if you click on the participants, on the manage participants, you will not see these right now because you're not the host, but getting to know the host controls is important. You will see the manage participants at the bottom when you are in a call, and that will release, that will bring up the list, the panel of participants on the right side. And these are the items that I was speaking about before. You can remove someone, for example, from a meeting, and you are able to remove them from the meeting. And if you have enabled the feature that says do not allow participants to rejoin a meeting, they will simply will not be able to join the meeting again, even if they have the URL, even if they have the meeting ID. The bottoms, the buttons at the bottom are also important to use. The mute all, self-explanatory. You as the host are able to mute everyone all at once, and you're able to make sure that everyone can hear you clearly. Again, a lot of the students or participants or anyone who joins a meeting may not be necessarily familiar with how to mute their microphones. So this is a pretty handy feature. If you go into the more, you will see similar items such as removing participants or even allowing participants to share their screen. So again, once you are the host of a meeting, you will see the ribbon that you see right here at the bottom of your screen. If you click on participants, it will open up the panel that I'm showing you on the right side. Let's see if I enable this. Second, I want to make sure that I show this. So let's see if this video works right here. Oh, it does not. But I have the picture right here. So the security button that I mentioned a few moments ago, it's when you are a host, you can see that at the bottom of your screen. This will bring up specific features. One of them is the lock the meeting. You can think of this, I was speaking to a colleague the other day, you can think of this as locking the door after you have started your meeting, right? So no one, even if they're trying to get into the room, they will not be able to open the door. That's essentially what it means. When you know that all of your students or all of your participants are on the call, you can go ahead and lock the meeting to add an extra layer of security. The enable waiting room also is a feature that Zoom enabled on April 8th by default. What this means is that when you are on the call, if someone else wants to get on the call, on the meeting, you have to approve them manually. There's also an option to approve multiple people at the same time, all at once. So let's say that you have 10 students who are coming in late, hopefully not, but let's say that's the case. You can admit them all at once if you see their corresponding names. You can also allow participants to share a screen, to chat, or to rename themselves. Obviously, if you see a check mark right here, that means that participants are unable to do that. So you can always click on this icon and then you can share, you can change those settings as you go along. One of the key things that Zoom enabled was enabling all of these features was not possible during a meeting before, especially the enabling waiting room. You could enable the waiting room before scheduling the meeting, but then you couldn't do it during the meeting, but now you're able to do that. So that's a very helpful feature.
Pablo, can I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
Okay, so in managed participants, we can make a co-host, and in security, we can share a screen. Can you tell us what the difference between those two is?
The co-host will have the similar privileges of the host. So right now, I am the host, and as the host, I am able to log the meeting and do essentially everything that you see on the screen. And if I, let's say, want to make Priscilla a co-host, I will bring all of those privileges to her and she can play around with anything on the call. She can enable participants, she can let participants in, she can remove a participant. And one of those features is sharing the screen. So sharing the screen, it's only one feature that by default, it's only available to hosts or co-hosts. But if you make a co-host, obviously that co-host could take full control of the meeting as well.
Thank you.
So as we move along here, I wanted to go back quickly to a password, the password feature. Remember that I mentioned to you a moment ago, you can enable passwords, right? But you also have the option not to do that, right? So, and there was a feature about enabling the one-click join when enabling the password. What essentially it does, it encrypts the password into the URL. You can see an example of that in here. Right at the top, you see a meeting with a general URL without a password.
What, honey? I'm on the computer.
And,
what?
There you go. So if you have a password, a meeting that does not require a password, you will see a simple URL, a short URL, relatively like this. But if you have enabled the password for that meeting, you will see a longer URL. And this is an additional layer of security. I am not a computer science person, so I'm not able to speak to the technicalities, but obviously this will be, based on the Zoom website, it is an encrypted URL that provides that access to that meeting with the password. Someone asked at the beginning of the call, how do you share these invitations via Blackboard? And this is the perfect answer. You take this URL and then you share that in your Blackboard course. Again, what I personally do in my classes is I take this URL and I embed it as any other regular URL on an announcement that I push via email on Blackboard. And I tell my students, we're meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. Here is the link, and I give them this. So that's how I essentially do it on Blackboard. These are, let me just move my video thumbnails right now. And these are the recommended settings that come straight from the CUNY protocol, security protocol that I will share with you the URL a little later towards the end of the session. It's a full PDF, but this graph is a good representation of what the essence is. Obviously, do not publicize classroom meeting or URLs, the URLs that I was mentioning in the previous slide. Do not post that on social media. Do not blast that on public emails because obviously that can bring potential risky situations. Set password for all meetings. Zoom recommends that. CUNY recommends that. If you enable the feature enabling join, a one-click join from with a password will bypass the students having to manually enter a password all the time. Turn off the file transfer. This is what I was mentioning at the beginning. You can enable chat but do not necessarily enable users, participants to share documents among themselves. Keep the Zoom updated as the most recent version. That's what I mentioned at the beginning. April 8th, Zoom released a range of different updates around security. So it's recommended that you update your client and the app on the mobile phone if you had that. And then let me just go over a couple of recommended by CUNY. Obviously, set the sharing screen only to you, so that way participants are not able to share their screen and may, number one, just be disruptive to the logistics, but also, hopefully this doesn't happen, but it doesn't give them the option to be disruptive and share content that's inappropriate. Log the meeting. That's on the security icon that I mentioned at the beginning. Once you know that all of your students are in the call, log the meeting. It's a one-click step that you can just go ahead and do, and that will give you an additional layer of security. And use the waiting room. And I'm going to show you in just a minute how you can admit or let more than one participant in
Can
at a
I
time.
can I just ask one question,
Yes, go
Pablo?
right ahead. Yes.
In Zoom, if you lock, what I'm finding in Blackboard Collaborate is that sometimes students, like, not a lot, but sometimes they leave. Now sometimes they're leaving because there's a problem with their Wi-Fi service and then they come back in. So my question is, if someone left and then tried to come back in, if I lock the meeting, then the student wouldn't be able to return. Is that it?
A great question. You can lock the meeting, but you can always unlock the meeting. So,
Okay.
so you can go and lock the meeting, and if someone mistakenly or due to technical problems had to leave and rejoin, you can always unlock the meeting and then let that person in once again. Again, you can think of this as the lock on the knob on the door on an actual room. You can lock it, but you can also unlock it every time you want to get out. So you can do that. Yeah, but great question. Yes. As we move along, using the personal meeting is, as I mentioned at the beginning, recommended when you are having a meeting with people that you regularly meet with a close group of colleagues, or also on office hours if you want to hold office hours. And I'm going to talk about that in just the next slide. But the personal meeting room will use your actual number that will not change. When you schedule a regular meeting, and I will show you that in just a minute, I'll jump into my browser in a moment, Zoom will automatically generate a meeting ID, and it will randomly assign that every time that you schedule a meeting. But when you're using the personal meeting room, it always will use the same number. It has the sequence of a phone number, so you can memorize that as your phone number, and you can give it to people so that they can join you in the room. So it's never recommended that you publicly share that number, obviously. And it works in the same way as a regular meeting, in the sense that you have a join URL that you can share with participants, and you are able to share that, and they are able to join you in your personal room meeting. I will show you the difference between that in just a moment. You have also specific settings for your personal meeting room that you can set. Similar to scheduling a meeting, you can enable the waiting room. You can even customize the waiting room, so that way people can see a customized message when they are coming in. I'll jump into the browser in just a moment to show you that. And here is the example of what happens when someone is in the waiting room. On the participants, you will see an orange sort of like notification there that will tell you the number of people that are waiting, or the number of people, the participants right here. And then when you open the participants, you will see one person waiting, and you can admit or you can simply remove. You can also send them a message. Hey, I am with another student right now. I'll be with you in 10 minutes. And then they will see that message as well. If you have more than one person, you will be able to see the admit all. And if you see all of those names and you recognize them all by looking at them, you can simply hit all. Everyone will come into the meeting instantly. Before I jump into final recommendations, let me go into my browser. But Priscilla, are there any questions so far?
Louisa had asked about saving video to Dropbox.
Yes.
I actually answered her question, but I want to make sure I completely understood her question. Louisa, are you there? Do you want to ask the question out loud? I'm not sure I answered it exactly what you were asking.
So I've actually gone past that, and I decided to use I have a personal Dropbox account and a LaGuardia Dropbox account. I'd like to share with the students from the LaGuardia Dropbox account. So currently in my file, like in my computer where I click on the file, I'm sorry, I'm not a tech wizard, but I'm doing the best I can.
That's
On my
fine.
computer where I have the file folder, I click on it. The Dropbox that I currently have saved is my personal Dropbox. Is there a way for me to save both my personal Dropbox and my work Dropbox on my computer?
You can, if you go, I have a quick answer to that. You can go into the Dropbox website. The Dropbox, as any other cloud service, will allow you to download the client into your desktop, and that will allow you to download the folders that you have on your CUNY Dropbox and your personal Dropbox, and you will be able to transfer files between those folders as you would transfer any other regular file from any folder to another folder. I actually do the same with OneDrive. I have my personal OneDrive, and then I have a CUNY OneDrive, and I go back and forth sharing documents as needed. So you might want to download that on your personal computer, so that way you're able to transfer files more easily.
I'll see if I can do that. And then my final question is, and I got to it once before, and I'm looking for it now, and now I can't find it. I know there's a way to choose on Zoom where the recording is being downloaded to.
The folder.
Yeah, where the folder is going. So initially it put it on a different spot on my computer, and I changed it and I moved it to my Dropbox.
Yes.
Is there a way for me to change that? And
yes,
I know there is, but I forgot where.
I believe I know where that is. Let me get to that in just a moment, and I want to show two things that I want to make sure that I show.
Okay.
Because I see it's 2:57. I'm sure there's other questions. I'm going to get to that in just a moment.
Okay.
Right at the beginning of this call, I mentioned the joined from browser that will allow users to bypass the download. It is under meetings and advanced, and this is the option right here. It's all under settings. You go into your dashboard, you go into the settings on the left, and then under meeting advanced, you will see the option join show a joined from browser link. What this will essentially do is it will enable the participant to join the meeting from the browser without necessarily having to download the client. They will still have the option to download the client, but they will also have the ability to join from the browser. And this is recommended for users who are not able to download any software on a computer. On the waiting room, once it is enabled, you can customize the message right here so that they will see a quick message once they are on the waiting room. You can say, "Hey, thanks for coming. I'll be with you shortly," something like that, and then put your name so that way they see something right upon entry.
Pablo, we have a couple of questions about attendance. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yes, and I saw that Maureen Doyle asked a question about, is there a way to call attendance? I don't think there's a straightforward way of doing this. What I personally do, and others can jump in if they do something different, is on the chat, I save the chat, and then right at the beginning, I tell my students, just put your name and then say present, like Pablo present, and then I go back to the chat, and I'm able to go back and then see that they've written their name. Obviously, that has a flaw because some of them may not do it on time, or some of them may just forget. Some of them may not know how to do it. So so there's a drawback there. Another option that I use is when I put students into a breakout room, I am able to see the breakout room and the list of the people in the breakout room. So I use the renaming feature that I showed you on the slides to make sure that they rename themselves and they put the correct name. The reason why I'm saying this is because there's plenty of students who are sharing devices, and their accounts may be under someone else's if Zoom has been being used by someone else. So I make sure that I put them, I let them know, make sure that you put your actual name. Some students may simply bypass and then it only may say iPhone. So you don't know who that is. So you allow them to rename themselves and make sure that they put the correct name. And when they are on the breakout room, I can go and see, okay, Mary and Joseph and Peter are here, and so it's here as well. While they're on the breakout room, I take a few minutes to tally up who's in the class. So I don't think those are straightforward ways, but at least that's what I do when I'm on a Zoom call with my students. I wanted to make sure that I get to Luisa's question. I think it's, no, it may, no, oh, I see, I'm sorry. This is on the client, Luisa. I'll definitely get back to you. Now I remember. This is on the client. The destination folder is what you're looking for. So that way you are able to tell Zoom, whenever I record to the computer, this is what I want you to put all of the video files. In the client on the computer, there's an option under preferences to select that destination folder.
Does it also ask you when you're just saving a recording, like where do you want to save this?
No.
No.
No, whenever you have the
Okay.
button for recording, it only tells you, do you want to record to the cloud or do you want to record to this computer? And by this computer will automatically take it to the folder that it's set by default or that you
Okay.
have changed.
All right.
Now, there is an option though. Every time you end a meeting, it automatically will pop up the folder where that file is. So that way you're able to do anything that you want with that file right on that spot. So you don't have to go browse, go documents, go Zoom, go video recordings. You don't have to do that.
And again, what do you recommend, just like, you know, for simplicity until you actually, I'm considering Dropbox, but for now, I mean, just on a regular basis, what do you recommend just to at least hold the file, the cloud or the computer? I know you mentioned it, but I just.
Yeah. So my recommendation is always to save to the computer for two reasons. Number one, you do not eat up your memory on the cloud. But number two, and perhaps number two should be number one, recording to the cloud, it's only available on paid accounts.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have a basic account, you have no other option other than saving to the computer. I want.
Oh,
Yes.
just one quick thing about Dropbox.
Yep.
For the CUNY Dropbox, you need to use your CUNY First ID.
Yes.
Not your
Yes.
LaGuardia.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is your CUNY First ID followed by the @login.cuny.edu. A lot of people get confused. Yes. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Sure.
I wanted to make sure that as we wrap up this session, I wanted to make sure that I show you where the CUNY cloud policy is. If you go into the website that I showed you at the beginning, faculty resources, it's all the way at the bottom under resources. I'm sorry, it's called Zoom Security Protocol. If you click on it, this is the PDF document. And this is the table that I showed you. These are recommendations by CUNY, recommendations by LaGuardia. So I would ask that you spend a few minutes going over all of this. All of these features are features that I covered in this session. And again, this is being recorded. You can go back into the recording and see pause specific features that you may want to investigate further. Yeah. Any other questions?
Well, just one quick thing I looked up to, because Christine had this question about Zoom attendance feature.
Yep.
So I just looked it up, and apparently if you have registration or polling enabled, that way you could get a report of who was there.
Correct. And I'm not entirely sure about this, but I'll still say it. Zoom does allow you to register in the same way that you register for this webinar. However, I believe that it's a paid feature. So if you have a basic account, you will not have the ability to register. And the other thing is that, at least in my own experience using Zoom, there's always people who register but never come. So relying on the list of those who register may not be the most accurate way. It will help you to tally up who went to the session, but it will not necessarily show you everyone who was in the call. So for example, there were 40 people who registered for this webinar. Right now there's 25. So you can get an idea.
Yeah,
by
but maybe
that.
polling would be good for that if we all participated in the poll.
Polling as well, but polling, I do know it's a paid account. So if you have a basic
Okay.
account, you do not have access to polling.
Right. Okay, good point.
Final recommendations. The page that I took you on, the settings, it has a number of features, but I highly, highly recommend, if you want to make sure that you have the best experience, make sure that you revisit those settings. I'm happy to troubleshoot and meet with you separately if that's what you need. But before scheduling a meeting, it's always recommended that you go over those settings. Find out how your students are joining a session. This is very interesting. And I learned that through experience. A lot of my students, I wanted to use a poll, I wanted to use the emojis and the reactions, but some students were joining from a phone and they just didn't see that. And I'm like, oh my God, it just didn't work. So it's important to see understand how your students are joining your session from a computer, from a tablet, from a phone, whatever resources they have. Turn off your camera when initiating by default. Not everyone is comfortable sharing the video right off the front. So I always recommend people turn it off and then turn it on manually. So that's just a personal recommendation. The nonverbal feedback are the icons that you saw at the bottom. There's additional ones that we didn't cover, but Zoom has those available. I find those engaging for making sure that students are at least listening to me. And I tell them, give me a thumbs up if everything is going well. And you know, I see the thumbs up populating, and that's a visual cue for me to know that at least they are there. Use the breakout room. Again, it's available on free accounts, basic accounts. I'm happy to walk people through an additional session if that's the case, for further exploring that. Visit the security button to make sure that you have full control. Again, I think one of the cool features is Zoom enable all of those controls all in one single place. You click on it and you can have control of the session. This is important, and I also learned this through experience. Consider asking your students, if you don't already do this, to have a physical notebook. A lot of my students were taking notes on the screen on a Word document, but it was difficult for them to have the video and the Word document at the same time. So I tell them, have a physical book, a notebook for them to take notes. It's always helpful. I'm sure many of you already do that, but I think it's an important consideration to put up front. And update your desktop client. It's very, very important, especially given all of the security privacy concerns you may have heard about Zoom so far. As a final point, there is already a session on Zoom that a colleague of mine, Olga from the English department, did. I'll make sure that I link that on the webinar recording once we post this on YouTube. But she did this great session, and she went over a number of different features. So I highly recommend that you watch that as well. Finally, support.zoom.us for quick tutorials is a great place. There are quick video tutorials about almost everything. So I highly recommend that you go and visit that website. I know we're over time, but I'm still happy to answer any questions people may have. Priscilla?
There are a couple of questions. One is, what's the best way for students to post work they do in breakout rooms? My students have used the chat, but the chat is only viewable if the host is in the breakout room.
So this is an interesting question. I don't think, and I'm speaking only from my experience, I don't think there is an actual place for students to post work when they are on breakout rooms. here's what I do. I post everything on Blackboard, and my discussion boards and my modules, everything is on Blackboard. So I use Zoom only as a communication tool. So when I put students into the breakout rooms, I tell them we're gonna follow module number 3 on this section on Blackboard. And I post either a discussion board or whatever it is that I want them to do on Blackboard. So when they are on the breakout room, all of the work that they are doing is specifically synced with the work that I want them to do on Blackboard. So I don't have them post anything on Zoom. I have them post everything on Blackboard, and I only rely on Zoom as a communication tool, not as a place to post actual work.
And then one more quick question. How do you update?
How do you update? If you are on the client, whether you are on the Windows or on a Mac, if you are on a Mac, you go into Zoom and you go into Preferences. There is an option there for you to see the updates. If you are on a Windows computer, you go into File and About Zoom, and then it will give you the version and the updates that are available. On your phone, whether you are on an iPhone or on an Android, make sure that you go into your App Store. I work on an iPhone, so I just go into the App Store. I see the updates that are available, and I press an update. I'm not too familiar with the Android, but similar process, go into the store and make sure that you run updates for your apps.
Great. Unless there are any other questions.
Any other questions? I'm happy to answer any additional questions people may have. Or give me a thumbs up if everything was fine. Go ahead, Michelle.
I just have one question again with using the personal ID for office hours.
Yes.
So I saw that you can actually have the students in the waiting room. So you can have students in the waiting room. I'm thinking if I were giving students different times, someone comes a little early, they would wait in the waiting room. But my question is, if everyone that I see in the personal meeting room will have my personal ID, correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
So if you go into the Zoom website, when you go into the Zoom website without logging in, there's a button on the upper right-hand corner that says join a meeting. If you click on that button, join a meeting, it will prompt you to enter a meeting ID. And if you tell a student, this is my personal meeting ID, he or she will type that in and then will enter that. If you have enabled the waiting room, obviously she or he will see the waiting room with a message. You will be notified, as I put on the slides, hey, Marisa is up on the waiting room. You can see, you can admit her, you can send her a message and say, hey, I'll be with you in 10 minutes, I'm with a student. And that way she's waiting, and then you can admit them into the room as well. But yes, they will have your personal meeting room number. Yeah, and
Okay,
this is essentially like your office number, right?
So no one can get in though. If I'm talking to you, say, another person can't just get in unless I did not enable the waiting room, anyone can get in. But if I enable the waiting room, then only, okay.
Exactly. And that is why it's important, especially, at least in my case, sometimes I tell my students, I'll have group office hours. In other words, people don't necessarily have to be with me one-on-one. And I tell them I'll be in group office hours and I can have 5, 6, 7 students. Or if a student does want to speak with me one-on-one, I put everybody in the waiting room and then I speak to that student only. Right.
Because when I was in Blackboard, it seems like the only thing I can do in Blackboard is I can just see that everyone's left, or if someone's sort of hanging out there, and I'll say, oh, are you, can you leave? I need to talk to so-and-so.
Yes.
So I'm just, and the only other way I guess I could circumvent that would have been putting people in breakout rooms.
Correct.
And then they're just waiting.
Correct.
Okay.
And then you leave that one individual that you don't want in a breakout room separately, and the rest of the people will not hear what you're saying.
Okay.
So yes, there's a question, can you record office hours? Yes, you can. Your personal meeting ID will be as a regular meeting. You can hit the record button excuse me, you can hit the record button and you can record. You can pause the recording if you want to pause and take a break, or I'll be right back, I'm going to use the bathroom or something. You can pause it and then resume, but you can record that as you would record any regular meeting with your students. Yeah.
Can you invite someone else into a person, like say, sometimes I would say when I was at LaGuardia, if there was a sensitive issue that say I need to have the program director and myself both there meeting with someone, would I be able to do that with the personal ID?
Correct. So normally when you use the personal meeting ID, you don't necessarily have to schedule a meeting. You can simply tell that person, hey, let's meet on Tuesday at 7 p.m. Here's my personal meeting ID. I'll be there. So you start your personal meeting ID, and then at that time, that person will go into the website, click on join a meeting, enter your personal meeting ID, and then that person will be letting, if you have enabled the waiting room, that person will see the waiting room message. You admit them or you do not admit them, you leave them hanging. So, and if you want to, let's say that you're speaking to a student and there's a sensitive issue and you want a program director or someone else to join, you can tell them, hey, I'm meeting with the student, I'm discussing this issue I told you about, can you join? Here's my personal meeting ID. They can enter, go join a session, enter your number, and join the session.
So they would be in the waiting room, I could pull them in.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
And say, hey, Professor so-and-so is here, let's admit them, and now you have 3 people on the call.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't you say that the waiting room is automatically enabled now, right? That it starts on that setting?
That is correct. So it is automatically enabled every time that you want to schedule a meeting. But if you go into the settings page that I was showing you, you can always disable that. So it is enabled by default, but you can always disable that if you do not want to enable that feature.
Um,
I have a question. What is the quickest way to invite the students? Because I've been copying the invitation and then putting it in email and sending out the email.
Me too. I found that easiest.
The quickest way, I think, is to, every time that you schedule the meeting, you schedule the meeting and you will see the URL and the meeting ID. The quickest way to do it is to tell the students we're meeting on Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. Here's the meeting ID. And then they go into the website, click on join a meeting. They will enter that number that you gave them, and then they will join the meeting. I find that to be the easiest and quickest way. Now, when you schedule a meeting not using your personal meeting room number, Zoom will automatically generate a random number, a 7-digit number that will be applicable to that meeting. So you would have to share that. So obviously the student will join on that Monday at 10:30 a.m. If the student wants to join the subsequent Monday at 10:30 a.m. for the next meeting, the next class, and is using the same number, Zoom has already generated a different number. It's no longer valid. It's almost like a one-time code. So, so that's one consideration when you're not using your personal meeting ID. When you're using your personal meeting ID, the number does not change. So you can memorize that and you can tell people, hey, let's meet on my personal meeting room number. Here's the number. I'll see you there on Thursday at 7 p.m. You log in that person. If he or she has that number, he or she will be able to connect with you.
Yeah, but for classes, you don't recommend using the personal ID number for the whole class.
It is my personal recommendation. You can very well use it. It is recommended not to use it when you have a large meeting with a class or a meeting with people that you don't regularly meet, because the personal number, cell phone number, it's almost like your personal cell phone number, right? If you're comfortable using it, there's really no difference. Actually, it's easier if you use that because the number never changes. So you can very well tell your students, we're meeting for class every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Here's my number for the remainder of the semester. I will see you every Tuesday at 11 a.m. And they have no excuse because the number will always be the same. That's actually very simple, right?
Yeah. If you schedule a recurring meeting, will it always be the same?
It will depend. You can if you schedule a recurring meeting, if you choose to use your personal meeting ID number, it will use that number. So
it's still a personal ID number. Okay.
Correct.
So it will change for
but
every.
It can also be, but Zoom can also generate an automatic number, random number. So you would have to go back, and each day of the week when you are seeing that appointment, you would have to grab that number if you chose that option. But you
Okay.
can very well use your personal meeting number, and it will never change.
Okay.
Question.
Yep.
Do you have to give a different, when you need to have password, you have to write a unique password for each meeting?
You can do that. However, Zoom will always generate a random password that it's secure. So that way you don't type in 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can very well do that. However, the option that I showed you earlier, which was enable the join with one-click meeting, will encrypt that password into that longer URL. So the students are bypassing the manually enter the password, right?
Okay, so Zoom will give you that password. You don't have to think of a password.
Yes, Zoom will give you a random password, but it will give you the field that you're able to edit, and you can put something else in the password if you want. But
I
by
would
default,
not want to do that. I would do the one-click thing as long. So that's the option that's there in setting.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So that one click still is random, though. It's
Correct.
still random. Oh, I thought when you did the one click, it was the same. So okay.
Yeah,
It's
and
random.
let me just show you what that looks like again, so that you are able to see. So this is a meeting that does not have a password embedded, simple URL. But if you enable if you schedule a meeting with a password and you have enabled the feature join with one click with a password, it will generate a longer URL. And that way you share that, and then people don't have to enter that password because you have enabled that feature.
Where is the join with password option?
Oh, let me show you. It is on the settings. Let me just go back.
Okay, thank you.
If you go back into your meeting, into your dashboard on the web browser, you go into your dashboard, you click on your icon, and then you go into settings on the left.
Yes.
Everything that I went over is on the settings, and there's a bunch of them right here. So it's right here. Join meeting from browser link. It is under meeting advanced.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you were talking about, I think I confused. You were talking about the join with the password,
You
correct?
said we have to do that through CUNY.
Yes. I forgot. Let me just put that up.
What do you mean you have to do that through CUNY?
It was one of the required functions that we're required to do when we call a Zoom meeting.
CUNY, so CUNY on the protocol that I shared on the slides recommends that for every meeting that you schedule it with a password. And I mistakenly show you a different option. The right answer to your question is right here. Embed password in meeting link for one-click join. What that means is that when you enable the password when you're scheduling the meeting, you will be able to let your participants join with that link without necessarily having to enter the password.
Right.
So that's the correct answer to your question. I
That's an
mistakenly.
advanced. That's in the advanced.
No, it is under scheduling meeting. Oops.
Okay,
It is
great.
under schedule meeting. Everything is on the settings. Yes.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, I think we went over time, but I am more than happy to answer any additional questions. Let's take the last one.
Pablo, I'm still waiting for you to explain how to change the file, where I can change the file to upload it into a different spot.
Give me 1 second. Let me see. I am going to share my desktop. Are you able to see my desktop client, Luisa?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this is my desktop client. I am working on a Mac. If you're working on a Windows, this may be a little different, and I'm happy to troubleshoot offline. But on a Mac, I am on the client. And you go into Zoom and the Zoom meeting, and then you go into preferences. And then under preferences, you click on recording on the left. And when you click on recording, this will tell you store my recordings at.
Yeah,
And then,
it's something completely different on Windows.
okay, so
I
let
don't
me,
even see that option on my Windows screen.
are you able to click on file on the desktop client?
No.
Okay, so I'm happy to troubleshoot with you offline. I'll reach out to you separately, and then I'll share also the instructions on how to do this on a computer, on a Windows computer as well. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining the session. Thank you so much for your time. It's been over an hour, but I think this was hopefully it was very helpful. Again, this is being recorded and it will be made available on our YouTube channel soon tonight. So I'll make sure that I share both the slides and the link by tomorrow, so that way you're able to go back and watch this as many times as you want. Okay, so thank you once again. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Stay safe, and if questions, feel free to email me. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was
Thank
great.
you so much.
Very useful. Thank you.